Hey YouTube, how's it going? So, a little while ago, I attended a talk on journalism, sort of like a panel actually. Um, but the title of the panel was How Journalists and the Public Shape Our Democracy, from social media and fake news to reporting just the facts. And this panel was moderated by um, Atlanta's own legendary Monica Kaufman Pearson, local news anchor. And, you know, in that panel, or when we attended that panel, they gave us some handouts. And this is one of the handouts, sort of like a guide in regards to journalism, as far as what's considered the ethics of a journalist, um, what's considered news versus opinion, what's considered real news from fake news, and helping you to differentiate between real news and fake news, and as well as your responsibility as a consumer of the news. All right. So let's kind of start off with what's the role of a journalist. And ultimately, people would say that the role of a journalist, and as well as journalism organizations, would say that the role of a journalist is to put out the truth, right? To deliver the truth. And four principles of ethical journalism, there's about four of them. And the first principle is to seek truth and report it. All right. Ethical journalism should be accurate and fair. Journalists should be honest and courageous in gathering, reporting, and interpreting information. All right. So putting the truth out there, getting the truth out there. All right. The next principle of ethical journalism is to minimize harm. Okay. Ethical journalism treats sources, subjects, colleagues, and members of the public as human beings deserving of respect. All right. Third principle, act independently. The highest and primary obligation of ethical journalism is to serve the public. All right. The last principle, fourth and last, be accountable and transparent. Ethical journalism means taking responsibility for one's work and explaining one's decision to the public. And this comes from the Society of Professional Journalists, www.spj.org. So, those are some things to think about when it comes to the journalism. I'll put that in quotes because sometimes I don't even think this is really, it's like it's news and people are reporting it, but I don't really think they're following any sort of journalism ethics at all. So, nevertheless, though, these are some things to keep in mind when it comes to the journalism that you consume. Do you think that the person or people who put this news story together followed these codes of ethics in regards to their journalism? All right. Next, let's talk about news versus opinion. All right, because sometimes the lines start to blur, and sometimes people are interpreting people's opinions as news versus what is actually news, instead. Many news organizations are divided into two parts. One, news. Journalists report the news, providing objective facts with context and analysis. All right. The second is editorial. Editorial writers, columnists, and contributors express their personal opinions. All right. In print and online, many news outlets clearly separate the news and editorials to help the reader distinguish the two. And that is true. see like, oh, this is the editorial section, so you're going to be seeing more so opinions about the news, right? So people are going to give you their interpretation of the news and sort of put their own spin on it versus the news that is separated, or the news that is actually considered, well, let me put it this way. It'll be editorial news and then our editorial journalism, and then it'd be a news journalism, right? Next, on TV and radio, it can be more difficult to determine what is news and what is opinion. Journalists still report the facts, but individuals who provide their opinions on certain matters may be called commentators, analysts, or contributors, right? And those are some some terms to look for and to be on alert for. All right. Next, let's talk about tips for determining real news from fake news. Okay. First, is information from a reliable and well-known website. Is the information from a reliable and well-known source of news? Right then and there, okay. Is this from a news organization that we're familiar with, like the CNN or NBC or Fox News, or the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, etc., 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 right? If it's not from a reliable source, then okay, you need to, give it the side eye. All right. Next, did the journalist clarify where the information came from? This is called attribution, and fake news often has no attribution. So basically, did this news organization cite their sources? And that's important. You do have to cite your sources, especially if you come from like an academic background of any sort. Especially like in college, you definitely can't just be making claims without having sources to back them up, right? You can't just be like, oh, there's over 5 billion people in the United States. And you're like, well, what source did you get that from? Because there's not 5 billion people in the United States, Next, did the article provide a reputable source or expert that you can easily verify with an online search? Good question. Next, look for quotes in the story. Legitimate articles should have quotes and sources provided. Yes, especially if you're getting like first-hand accounts, then that would definitely be necessary to put people's first-hand accounts in quotes, or people's speculations in quotes, or people's opinions in quotes, right? Pay attention to the domain and website address of online articles. Established websites have trusted domains such as .org and .com. Sites that should not be trusted may have unusual domain names or domain endings such as .com, .co. So look at the website name, Next, read the About Us section of a website to learn more about the organization. Is there an About Us website or section on their website? Something to think about, right? Next, check the comments section. Often readers will call out articles that are fake in the comments section. Yeah, definitely. I always look at the comments section when it even comes to like YouTube videos, like especially YouTube. I'm always looking at the comments section. I'm like, what do people think about this, right? let's see some discussions, some conversations, some debates in the comments section. No beefs though, all right? No beefs. All right, next. And this is the last one. Use Google Image to search for the photo being used. If the image is used in many articles on different topics, it may not be an image of what the article claims it is. So that one is, a nice little trick to have up your sleeve when it comes to deciphering the real news from the fake news. All right. So last but not least, I want to talk about your role and your responsibility in this, or should I say our role and our responsibility in this. All right. So do your research to make sure the story is true. Okay. That's the first step, our first role and responsibility. Okay. Next, follow a variety of sources to get the full perspective of a story. Okay. Not just your favorite news site or station, right? And that is true. It is good to get different viewpoints from a story. And sometimes this may even come about when it comes to, like, say, news sources that are international, like, say, the BBC, versus news sources for us that are domestic, more so like maybe the New York Times, right? Next, don't share news stories if you're not sure of the source, right? And that's important. Sometimes some stories gain life because people share them with their friends, and one person shares with one person, another with another, and so on and so forth, and bam, it's going viral. And some stories don't need to go viral because they're not true. Right. Next, and the last. If you see someone sharing something that may be fake news, speak up and let someone know, like, call it out. Hey, this is fake news because of X, Y, and Z, or A, B, and C. So that's pretty much all I got. I just wanted to share that with you guys, see what you guys think. And I think this is really important for people to know and have an idea about when it comes to being more cognizant of what is real news versus what is fake news, especially in the time of social media, in the time where news is at an instant, and especially nowadays, there's not as much kind of like fact checking. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist anymore, but due to social media, people oftentimes want to get the story out as soon as possible. So fact checking oftentimes becomes secondary, right? Back before the rise of technology and social media, there was more fact checking, because you kind of had to go through certain sources to get the news out. But because of social media, it's like somewhat of a shortcut, right? And sort of equalizes and levels the playing field, So that's what I gotta say. So what do you gotta say? Let me know in the comment section. Until the next video, adios and goodbye for now.